Hi, I'm Jen from JenThereDoneThat, and this is my experience buying property here in Puerto Rico. If you're new to the channel, hi, welcome. I'm Jen. I've been living full-time in Puerto Rico for the last 9 years, and I've purchased property twice. I originally moved to Palmas del Mar. I lived there for 8 years and rented. I moved a lot. I lived in 5 different places in Palmas, at least. And I had the opportunity to move to Cabo Rojo. I had gone to Cabo Rojo a few times, absolutely loved it. And friend of a friend, I got into another rental there, and it was a beautiful place. Right by the beach, gorgeous location, easy to get to. Great property. I absolutely loved it. And when the owner said that she was interested in selling it, when I moved in, I originally told her, if you think about selling this, give me first right of refusal. Please call me. Please let me know if you want to sell this. And within 8 months of renting, she called me and said, I'm thinking about selling my condo. And I said, well, I would like to buy your condo. I asked her price. It was very reasonable. I was aware of what other properties, similar comps were going for in my neighborhood. I had a pretty good idea of what would be an appropriate price, and she hit right in that number. So without hesitation, I said, I will buy it. Please sell it to me. No realtors involved. Let's just deal with the lawyers and I'll buy the condo. And so she had her lawyer write up the contract. I reviewed it, looked at it, and had a signed contract. No problem. So I thought. The whole process actually took 6 months. So once I had contract in hand and I thought, all right, now I'm going to go get a mortgage. I've done this before. I've got a mortgage for a home before. It should be easy. No. That one of the things that I learned that is very different to me is in Cabo Rojo, because so many people have second homes there. A lot of people live in San Juan and it's their family getaway, their family home, just like a cabin in the woods. It's their home by the beach. And my condo complex was actually classified as a second home, even though it was my primary home. It was the only home I was going to be purchasing. My primary home I was going to be living in, owning, and I could not get a regular mortgage because it wasn't considered a primary residence. I went through a number of different, local credit unions, and my mortgage broker was great. I went with FEMB, and they were able to kind of help me through the process and all the things I didn't know, which was a lot, things that were just completely different than buying property in, say, another state in the United States. The title search is the same. You still need insurance. The mortgage lending application should have been the same, but because it was a second residence, that's how the appraisal came in, that's how the financing came in, and so it meant I needed to go to alternate financing credit unions. And one of the credit unions, we had a locked-in rate, we had a closing date, everything, and a week before we were supposed to close, all of the members of the board of the bank, of the credit union, were indicted for fraud and removed because that happens here. I just had the worst timing. It literally took from the time she and I agreed verbally on the phone to the time we sat down at the mortgage lender and signed all the paperwork was 6 months. Yeah, 6 months of constantly verifying my employment. I'm self-employed. Sending in wage stubs, pay stubs and proof of everything, bank statements. It was 6 months of that process, whereas previously, when I've purchased a primary residence with a mortgage, it was 30 days or less. I already had the financing lined up before I went house shopping, so this was a different situation because it wasn't exactly planned, and it not knowing what to expect. I've talked to a lot of people about buying homes here on the island, but I was the first person that I have heard of that had the second home financing issue. So now I know to ask that question. Is this technically classified as a second home? If you're in any kind of condo or homeowners association, ask. I also had never purchased a condo before, so I went through the bylaws of the homeowners association, asked a lot of questions. I was familiar with the HOA from renting for 8 months, but buying was another process altogether. And so I think that was very similar when I talked to other people buying a condo here versus buying a condo other places. There were a lot of similarities. So if you've ever bought a condo, you're 5 steps ahead of where I was. All that said, it was a pretty straightforward, slow process. And then remember, Christmas starts October 1st and doesn't end until February. So we had a lot of delays with the Christmas holidays. I am joking a little bit about that, but Christmas week, Three Kings Day, all of that delayed further. And so, yes, it was 6 months from the time I said, I want to buy your home to signing. I filmed part of this on closing day, and getting there was quite the ordeal. So the last couple days, things have been changing rapidly. I've done some signing electronically. I'm about to go into the office to finalize the documents and finally close on this property in Puerto Rico. Let's go see what that entails. Less than 2 hours, all the paperwork is done. The owner was in the next room signing. We were passing documents between the rooms. The lawyer came in after they had signed, I had signed. Everything is done. Even though some of the documents were signed electronically, we still signed them in person, whatever. Actually, the signing process went very well. As I said, under 2 hours. I'm pretty happy about that. Bring your blue pen with you to sign. And we had the final closing docs. The lawyer made sure that we understood everything, and the Fannie Mae documents are actually in English and Spanish. So if you're not a native Spanish speaker or you're not comfortable with legal documents in another language, you've got that option. So overall, good process, and it's done. My next property was a different story altogether, but it's still no realtors. Realtors have been fantastic for finding rentals. Most of my rentals have been found through realtors. I find a realtor that I like and just say, this is what I'm looking for, find it. My very first residence in Palmas del Mar, I had contacted a realtor, sent my wish list of items of everything I wanted, and the very first home that we looked at, we ended up living in for 2 years. It was not the only home I looked at, but the first home we looked at checked all of my boxes, and we went and looked at 6 other properties, and I just said, the first one, the first one, the first one. So sometimes you get lucky, and then I know people that just look and search and they can't find what they're looking for. It doesn't check all their boxes. It's not within budget. It's a challenge. But one of the things I am grateful for is that I spent time in the area before I committed to a rental. I spent time living in the area before I purchased. That's been something I recommend to people. So you know what you're getting into with the neighborhood, the community, and whether or not it's the right fit for you. Can you handle the commute to wherever you go the most? Whether it's your job or church or social functions or whatever. I definitely am grateful that I already knew the areas of the island before I purchased in those areas. So now I'm in Ceiba, and Ceiba was another example of I came out to visit my friend who lived at this property, and I love it. This is my dream home, and I told her, I said, I love your house, I love your property. If you ever think about selling, or your neighbors, think of me, contact me. I would love to have an opportunity to either be your neighbor or buy your home. I thought it was a long shot. Her husband was born on the island. They've lived here for decades. There's no way, but they owned other properties on the island, so maybe. And I was pretty surprised when I got a call and said, how serious were you about buying my house? And I said, completely, yes. And again, it was, we don't need to involve a realtor. We've already got each other, sat down, hashed out what, what we wanted to pay, when we wanted to move, all of the details, and sent it off to lawyers and said, hey, turn this into a contract, and this is what we want to do, and just dealt with lawyers. And not that I ever really want to deal with lawyers, but real estate lawyers, especially here in Puerto Rico, are pretty easy. They just need to, they do the title check. They make sure that there's no liens against the property. We looked at how this property is zoned because it is a farm. It is a working farmhouse and property. So I wanted to make sure that I was zoned for commercial farming, and looking up the zoning, looking up everything, and looking at what power generation this community is fed from. Because believe it or not, you need to know where your power generation is coming from here on the island, because it makes a difference on how stable that one is. The closer you are to the generator, usually the more stable. If you're surrounded by pharmaceutical manufacturers, hospitals, airports, more likely to have more reliable power generation. And more reliable is definitely a relative term. We also checked on, which water source do we have? How is the water? Cabo Rojo has very hard water because of the location where they're getting the water from. It's harder water. It's harder on appliances. And we had a water filtration system, RO, everything. So that made a big difference in Cabo Rojo. Here in Ceiba, our water is rainforest fed. That also means that we're next to the rainforest, and so it rains a lot. It was pouring rain this morning. But the water quality is excellent. And that was one of the other things we do as commercial farmers, is we do soil tests, water tests for the vegetables that we're growing. And this is excellent for vegetables. This is the ideal place for a vegetable farm. We've got great soil, we've got exceptional water, and because this was already a working farm, mostly for horses and livestock and some market garden, but the previous owners put in water throughout the property, so it's made irrigating and caring for animals easy. Now, that brings us to, yes, I have animals. I If you watch my 9-year update, I have 7 cats, 10 ducks, 6 chickens, and 4 sheep. And my property is zoned. I can have animals, I can have livestock, I can have a vegetable garden, I can have, that was important to me to check on, to make sure that what I wanted to do with this property, I was legally allowed to. And because I knew the previous owners, I got a really good history of what was going on. And they're still they're my friends. So I know what they did. They gave me the full story of the remodel on the house, and I've met the neighbors. I actually already knew a few of the neighbors here in the neighborhood, which just right up the street from me. And that's been wonderful. One of the, not related to buying property, but just a challenge of moving to Cabo Rojo. I only knew a few people over there. And yes, when I originally moved here 9 years ago and I moved to Palmas del Mar, I didn't know anybody. I had no friends, no family. I didn't know anybody here on this island. And I've made a lot of friends since then. So I've built a community here on the east side of the island, and trying to build a similar community on the west side was a little more difficult, just because there's so many tourists in Cabo Rojo, and again, because my building was classified as a second home, most of my neighbors, I would meet them and they are diaspora from the States, or they're doctors and lawyers from San Juan. There was a small percentage of people that actually lived full-time in Cabo Rojo, and many of them are just kind of homebodies. They like the seclusion. They're not out to make friends. They're certainly polite, and I have some great friends over there, but it was just a different social environment for me. So that was kind of something to keep in mind when you're buying property. Are you going to have your social activities, your friends, your family, your work, I'm a big scuba diver. There's not a lot of scuba diving in Cabo Rojo. It's very shallow. It's great for snorkeling. So I would go and drive up to Rincon and Aguadilla to go scuba diving, or back over here to Fajardo and Humacao for scuba diving. So something to keep in mind when you're looking for property. Everything that I wanted was back on the east side of the island. So again, when I had the opportunity to move back over here and to buy my dream property, I could not resist. And it has been a much easier process because it wasn't classified as a second home. I already had gone through the process. I knew where to look, what to do. And again, the lawyers, it was very straightforward. So even though buying property is totally different in some regards, as far as Castro numbers, I don't have a physical mailing address here. I haven't had a physical mailing address for quite a few of the places I've lived. I think that's rural towns. I'm a big city girl, not a small town girl, so I think that's just kind of a small town thing that I'd never experienced before. But the major players in mortgage that you would normally think of going to don't exist here in Puerto Rico. You're dealing with our banks, our credit unions, and so everything moves a little slower. It's still a slower process to go through purchasing a property and changing the utilities over, switching your water, your electric, internet. Actually, internet was pretty easy, but we have Liberty Internet, and our Liberty Internet cable box from Cabo Rojo will not work in Ceiba. So we actually had to return our Liberty box to Liberty in Cabo Rojo and then pick up one that was set up or configured for Ceiba. There are just certain things that I'm not sure why, but even moving from the west side to the east side of the island almost feels like moving to a different state, even though you're still on the same small island. This time for moving, when I moved to Cabo Rojo, I hired a moving van, I hired people to help us move, and it really was not worth it. We had some things broken. It took longer. The expense was double what I was originally quoted. So when we moved over here, did it ourselves. And, you know, it probably was about the same amount of money, but I made sure that, you know, if I broke something, I broke it. But I didn't really break a whole lot moving over this time, so it was a much easier process. I hope I've answered some of your questions of buying property in Puerto Rico. I know I have a different experience than probably most people. I think every time you buy property on the island, it's going to be different than what you have ever done before and what you will ever do again on this island. It's always just a little bit different. There's no set checklist or rule book which goes against everything in my type A brain. I like an easy checklist, but because it varies so much on what kind of property you're buying, where you're buying, are you using a realtor, are you just using lawyers, what's been negotiated, what's the insurance, the appraisals, those are pretty standard and the same that you would be used to buying property just about anywhere else. So thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos from Jen There, Done That, living in Puerto Rico.